Okay, so earlier the week that I'm recording this, I sent a thing out that was basically asking for questions, and so I can do a Q&A real quick on just if you guys had any questions on how I do my things. I know I had a comment basically I am already open enough with how I do my stuff that I don't know how much of this will be necessary, but I think if someone had questions on how I do my stuff, I feel like this would be a good opportunity to kind of, answer those questions. So, top of the list, Real Soviet Bear asked, how do you deal with the number of requests that I send you? So basically, to reword this, basically, because I have something on my stream where basically people can send in their requests. And there's a lot of requests at the moment. So how does that actually impact how I schedule things? Well, basically the way it works that I plan on having it work is that if I'm trying to think of like a theme or like an episode theme, like I'm like, oh, I wonder what I should do. The request I will go through them and say like, okay, is this something that kind of fits here? Or if there's something that I'm like, oh, like I have there's so many games I can choose, but I'm like, oh, like someone requested, say, trying to think, someone, actually, no, I don't, no. Like, for example, and this is something that just came up because that game Monster Boy came up, but ranking that game, like I know Bear requested that recently. And obviously, I'm not going to do that because I need to do the games. Like, I'm not going to do that soon because I'm not going to need to. I'm going to need to do all the games before that the game is a giant reference to. But it will kind of like, okay, I know that's a request. Maybe I should kind of like, rather than try and think, okay, what game am I play? Oh, I should kind of go through the Wonder Boy games. Like, that would be a good thing or franchise to kind of take a look at. So I'd kind of prioritize those kind of games. The thing is, some of those requests are so specific that I kind of have to wait for a theme to come up, or I kind of let them stockpile like I kind of did, which is why January is nothing but request month, so I can get some of these done. So that's kind of how the requests are. It's basically guidance. I will try and do them at some point. So basically, they're kind of putting them on a priority queue. Or for me to think of games that kind of that I can fit those games into. So that's that. Malik asks, if you were to ever revisit a past project, what would you pick? I really don't have that many past projects that I would want to, that I'm really kind of actually already doing that because going back, I actually started a long time ago on YouTube. I don't even know how long ago making, basically doing what I'm doing right now is basically like, oh, here's a video on a really neat game that got a few views, but basically it was what I was planning on doing, and it's something I could do in like Windows. Like that would have been, God, that could have been almost a decade ago that I was doing that. So yeah, and then the LPs that I kind of really getting into, especially with my current brand, Lolo De Puzlo. I started in August of 2015 doing an LP of Legend of Zelda Randomizer, and then the other ones that I had were taking a look at Famicom Disk System games. Both of those kind of fizzled because, burnout, really, because those were heavily edited, and also, like the Famicom Disk System one, that was around the time when I did that I started to realize that maybe those games were not as good as I remember them, and playing nothing but those kind of games kind of burns you out. Then there was also Section Z and Friends, which the reason that one died was when the whole something awful, the whole thing of low tax and him kind of showing his true colors, or more so than usual, and like to start the LP zone, where basically, because that happened right when that thing was started, that kind of killed my interest in LPing. Although that is what ended up becoming Ranking of Shmups. So really, those are kind of my main past projects. The one thing that I would say that I could probably revive from that, and it's something that I'm going to have to do at some point, is taking a look at the various amount of randomizers that are out there, because there's a lot of them. And whether or not they actually work or not, I think would be something to take a look at. So really, if I was to do a past project, that probably, of the ones that I've even done, that would probably be it. But yeah, that will be coming, but probably not for a while. And then Axe was more than generous with the questions, so the rest of these are kind of from him. So, starting off, how do you remember all those facts about games? The answer is basically I'm a huge trivia nerd, so if it is pointless information, my brain restores it, but if it's something that is actually important, I tend not to. And I've just always been fascinated with trivia ever since I was little. Also, I do a good amount of research prior to my streams, so I do spend probably an hour or two in a week just taking a look at some interesting facts about the games that I'd be playing. So yeah, basically research and just me being a huge trivia nerd is why I remember all those facts. Take another drink. Okay. Next question. What is your criteria for choosing a game to rank? Really, there isn't one. Basically, if it's something I can get footage that is, and I have this basic. It's basically the criteria that I have on the front page of the ranking. Basically, the rules that I have are original on a video game console of the 5th generation or older, with the exception of Arcade and Dreamcast. So that's PlayStation 1 and Saturn. Prior, with the exception of Arcade and Dreamcast. If it is a sequel to the game that has been ranked, so like give Zelda, for example, I will probably take a look at the ones that are like Wind Waker and past the threshold for the console. Explicitly goes for a aesthetic that mimics retro. So just some examples of games that like I've ranked on Ranking of Shmups. Games like Hydra, or games like one that I'm going to be ranking in January, Zero Ranger. Or games like the games at Local Molito, like Hydra, Maldita Castilla, Curse of Vicios, those kind of games where they're obviously going for a retro style vibe. So and also like one that the one that's the number one game on the Resistance list right now, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which was explicitly going after that, Castlevania 3 vibe. And then also be of a genre that is listed pre-approved. Really the only ones I have a kind of a list already in there, but really definitely shmups, definitely pinball, like games like pinball, light gun games, brawlers of like the old school kind of brawlers, sprite based FPS. For example, when I need to do more first person shooters, but Dusk that came out recently is definitely a qualifying game for this kind of thing. Even games like one that came out relatively recently, I think, called Lost in Vivo, is also another game that I'd probably say would be viable. But yeah, also games like Maze games. So games that are definitely of that style. I might even include fighting games on the list, but then again, that's its own beast. So yeah, there's that. In terms of like which ones do I kind of put closer to the top of the list. Really, also, I should say, really the only games that I think, actually, he has a question later on that we'll go into this, but yeah. So yeah, basically, I really don't have a huge criteria. The one thing I will go into, and it's something that I've been thinking about actually ever since I did the episode on Bubsy, is that basically, because I know that there's kind of that thing where basically oh, maybe I should take a look at the games that I wouldn't quite call them memey, but basically like there's a bit of notoriety about them. Like for example, the episode that I'm going to be doing next, games based on Tuhu. There's kind of that whole joke about Tuhu being Tuhu and just like, oh hey, it's a Tuhu game. But the thing that and this is actually something that I've actually really enjoyed about doing the series, is actually taking a look at some of those games and actually realizing, oh wait, those games are actually kind of good. Like, there's all the jokey about them all being kind of similar in this weird kind of dull fantasy thing, but they're really interesting games on their own. Like, I try to like treat these games like with some amount of respect, and like I know it's going to be fun when I inevitably do. I have it currently as a 10 subscriber milestone, so that's not going to be for quite some time. But Undertale, because that definitely has the fun group of people around that game, where not so much like because I do kind of want to treat that game with, I think that game deserves a little bit more respect than it's kind of given. Like, it's one of those games that's kind of very often derided, but especially for it is a game that has, and I think it's mainly due to its, let's just say, passionate fan base. But I actually think that game, I think there kind of seems to be a thing with games like that, where basically they first come out and they're like, oh, this game is like fantastic, it's one of the best games of all time, and it's kind of like a kind of a honeymoon period where basically it's like, oh, this game is like really phenomenally praised, and then the group of people that comes out that want to kind of poke holes in it comes out, and then basically maybe this game is people are a bit hypercritical about the game, where basically it's derided a bit more than it really should be, but also as it comes out with, oh, maybe this game's not quite the masterpiece as we kind of recommended or kind of proclaimed, and then basically it's like, oh, this is just a game that people are passionate about, but then there's also the people who are still, oh, haha, sans Undertale, blah 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 blah. And I don't care for that. I think it's still, even though there's maybe some flaws that have come out from it after that game's come out, I still think there's a fascinating story behind that game. So yeah, I try and do that. So that's definitely a tangent that's quite not quite what I think. It's a bit more than I think we've answered this question, or that question at least. So yes, next question is, what has been the most difficult game to rank, or for any reasons? Two very specific games that happen to be Namco arcade games. One is Dragon Buster, the other is Tower Juaga. And actually, maybe a third game would be, actually, we had this happen, I think, on the last episode we recorded, which is Home Alone for the NES. And those are for two separate reasons. Dragon Buster, the main reason is, and this is kind of why, this is one of the games that kind of inspired me to think of that idea for Lolo guides or a focus test. Dragon Buster is such a weirdly specific game that doesn't really play a whole lot like other games. And it's kind of hard, especially since I'm playing it and I know it, to kind of show off how that game will play for you. And really, I didn't have that many people to kind of guide with that. So I really had to choose. Like, when I was putting it on the list, I had to kind of think for myself, like, okay, what would someone else think? Because there is a thing, and especially it's a sentiment that I kind of find not quite insulting, but it's kind of irritating when I hear it, where basically, oh, it's your list. You decide where it goes. That's not what I want to do. That's boring. I don't care about why would I do this series for something that's my own opinion? I know what my own opinion is. Like, that's not something interesting for people who are actually wanting to watch this. I think it'd be better that if I try and have a more objective opinion, which granted, there's no such thing as a fully objective thing. That's just pointless. Like, it's impossible. Like, there's always going to be my element of there's going to be a little bit of my bias in all of these, but I try and limit it. It'd be best if I try and limit it as much as possible. So ranking Dragon Buster was kind of hard because I did kind of say, well, I actually really enjoy this game, but I know that it is a very finicky thing, and I do kind of want to temper its placement on the list. Even with that, I did put it. It's currently 33, which is higher up in the blue. Maybe it might belong a little bit lower if someone else were to play it, but that's kind of one of the more difficult ones. Also, the other thing is that the problems that I had with Tower of Druaga and Home Alone is some of these games they're hard to place because, like, okay, is Home Alone? Does it belong in the attack list? Does it belong in the dexterity list? Does it belong in the mind list? Does it belong in the planning list? Because there is some slight bit of puzzle solving. You have to be fast on your feet, so maybe it belongs in dex. You could kind of think of it as a maze game, but it is also a strategy game, so we ended up putting in the planning list. Tower of Druaga also is also a thing because is that game a puzzle game? Is it a maze game? Or is it a delve game? We ended up putting it in the delve. I'm actually not 100% certain if that's where it actually should belong, though, because I think one thing with delve that I think I might invalidate this at one point is the fact that delve games tend to rely a lot on backtracking, which really, the only backtracking that you do is if you forget an item, and it's forced backtracking. So that's a little bit difficult. Some of these are kind of hard to place, but other than that, that's kind of the main two things that kind of are difficult to rank. Basically, is how much does my personal influence have on the ranking? Another example of that is Pilot Wings, which I think it was really good that when I had more people, especially people who had played it and were able to say, like, because I would be, oh, hey, I love Pilot Wings. I know exactly how to play it, but then people like Torpo and Bear were around to say, they were like, hey, no, actually this game was a nightmare to play if you're not familiar with it. That needs to be factored in. So, that was definitely, that always helps. So that's that question. What games would you absolutely never rank ever? Really, there is one category of games, and that's porn. Or anything, really I should phrase that as anything that can be banned on Twitch. Or YouTube. There was actually a game that I was planning on doing for Valentine's Day of last year, which was Tender Loving Care. Because that is an interesting game. Also, I guess technically would count retro, so it would be viable for this. But right around the time that I was planning on doing that, Twitch put out a guidelines that said, okay, technically, one of the things is that you can never play a game that has an adults only rating, which that game technically did. So that kind of killed it for me playing that game. Although it's kind of come out that, well, maybe that isn't actually as concrete as it was. So maybe we might actually take a look at that one in the future. But yes, definite no porn games. There was another game that I was planning on doing for ranking of shmups called Deep Space Waifu, which is a shmup that basically you blow girls' clothes off for like a goof episode, but I still probably would not even do that. Like, that's as close, because technically it's not rated. But yeah, that technically would qualify, but I would not do it for. Also, it is incredibly skeevy, and I don't want that. Would be a very uncomfortable segment of streaming. The only other games that I can think of, I'm pretty much probably going to put a moratorium that, even though technically it's a sequel to the franchise, I'm probably never going to rank Sonic 06. That game's been done to death. We know it's bad because this was going back to like the games I think that it's like, oh, I should rank that because it's haha, there's a kind of a joke around it. Games like Bubsy or like God, I don't know what, but or almost you could kind of say Gex, although Gex has a sense of competence of it that I guess. But that doesn't quite move it in this category. But there's a lot of games that I feel it's like, oh, hey, just play these. These are bad games. Although there's different categories of bad games. You got games like, say, something like Deadly Towers or something like We Garfield or games like Ernest Evans, which they're bad. But they're also this nightmare creature that it also kind of is interesting. It's interesting to look at. Like, trying to think of like the mindset of like the people who develop it. I never want to say that people are just lazy because that is an incredibly poor, it's bad criticism to kind of say, oh, they're just lazy because one, you don't know that. Two, it's just a crappy thing to say about someone that you don't know, because you don't know if they're lazy. They might have worked their heart out, but you don't know. But yeah, it's trying to think of there's something interesting about the badness of the game. Then there's also just bad that's like it's an astronomical level of like the game barely runs. Like there's a lot of Atari 2600 games like that where it's like, oh, it's just weird because it just barely works at all. Like there's a game Hoshiwo Mirohitu or Those Who Gaze at Stars, I believe is the Japanese name. It's an RPG that it's just, although this could probably call into the other category, it's just a RPG that fails on every single thing that it tries to do. And I think that'll be interesting to look at. But then you've got games like, say, Bubsy or I'm thinking of Power Pigs or something like that, where it's just, they're not super bad. They're not the territory of like that. They're just games that it's like, oh, they're not good, but also they have this sense of like, again, I know this might be a little bit hypocritical for the thing I said, but there's some sort of like almost manipulation. Like it was built to be annoying in a way that gets people interested in it, in a way that's not like, it's not organic. Like it's kind of oh, let's do this intentionally bad, and the people's sense of irony will kind of spread this thing out, even though this thing probably shouldn't in the first place. It's just that ironic sense of like, oh, haha, this is funny. Like, let's look how bad this is, even though it's not that bad, which those are games that I tend to avoid. Although Bubsy I had to kind of do, because if we're talking about mascot platforms, I kind of had to do that one. But yeah, it's not something I'm like, oh, I really want to do those kind of games. It's actually a game where it's like, trying to put those off as much as possible, really. So yeah, the only games that I tend not to, that I will absolutely not do is probably porn games and like Sonic 06. This is actually the only one I would say, no, I'm not doing that because that game's just been done to death. It's just not good. Like, there's nothing really I can add to that. Also, trying to play that game on, like, now, when if I'll be getting, like, a 360 or a PS3, which I really do not feel like doing if I don't have to. And then games like I'll inevitably have to do Bubsy 2 or, like, Bubsy, the one for the Jaguar, which those I kind of put those off because it's like that's not the kind of interesting that I want to take a look at. Because yeah, I know that's also another tangent off that, but yeah. Also, he has another question, but basically the question is, but seriously, Kingsfield. But I think that actually can kind of go into a different question, which is basically, or something that I've also been thinking about, which is RPGs and how I'm going to plan on doing them. Because, especially with things like Dragon Quest, like RPGs, especially like JRPGs, they require a lot of time. A lot of time that would be taking from other games. So, like, thinking about just an average JRPG that isn't like, and it's also something that it's a game that I had a kind of a negative experience with streaming a while ago, which is a game called Live a Live, which is it is an incredibly interesting game. The problem is it has a pacing of like a slug, and it takes a lot of time to get interesting. So I'm kind of debating about how I do RPGs in the future, like saying something like, say some like Final Fantasy like 7 or 8 or like even like 6 or 5, where these are 20 plus hour games that I have in a week, like 6 hours worth of streaming time. Like my streams tend to be 3.5 to like 4 hours episode. So it's like 7 or 8 at most. And so that would completely monopolize almost half a month to fully take a look through that game. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do those. Because one thing that I've been thinking about is, do I just do a snapshot in time, like a snapshot of the game? So like I only do like, let's get to a kind of a pivotal part of the game which really shows off kind of what this game's all about. Just kind of play up to a certain point. So you see somewhere in the middle of the RPG where the game actually gets interesting and it has like the mechanics, because usually those things also take a long time to build. And then have like maybe some story recap thing. So yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about for RPGs, but also, especially if it's something like Kingsfield, which a lot of those games, you kind of really need to know how those games play in order to really show them off. So, yeah, it's something that those would require a little bit more work. So it's something that I have been thinking about, but I don't plan on, and actually I originally was planning on saying I'm not going to do RPGs exactly for that reason, but if I find a way to actually show them off properly, like a really good and condensed way of showing them off, I have no problem showing off RPGs. It's just, I got to think of how I want to do it. Okay. So, next is, what kind of setup do you use for your streams? So, there's a couple ways I can answer this. Basically, if we're talking about equipment, so the mic that I'm using right now, which is kind of one of the more, so actually just to start off with the computer that I'm working on. It is a custom, it's a computer that I built. I have an i7 something in it, so it's a pretty decent CPU. I have a video card of a 1060, I think it's a 6 gigabyte one. Not the most powerful card, but most definitely works. I use the software that I use to stream is I use OBS Studio for the main stream that goes up Twitch, because thankfully I know someone who who offers a service to basically, he hosts an RTMP server, which I can have a side stream going out to that people can watch on either a website or through VLC. So I have 2 streams going on whenever I stream. So the main stream, I use OBS Studio, and this is also where I set up all of my overlay little bits. So my overlay, basically, it is something that I made myself in Asprite. And basically, the things that I do, because I don't want to go off from the thing, so people on the audio don't want to potentially break this. But basically, on my actual mainstream, I have the thing that shows going from, I guess, top to bottom. The thing that shows off what the Discord people, like the people who are currently in the Discord chat, that is the Discord Stream Kit, which Discord gives out. I believe if you just type in Discord OBS Stream Kit, it'll be one of the first options. It's a nice little browser. It's basically a browser that you can use OBS Studio's browser plugin to kind of, it'll show up on your stream, and it's nice and transparent, and you can size it however you want. Discord has a few like built-in like widgets, but they're not that great. But that OBS Stream Kit one really works well. The thing is about it that you have to watch out for is that if you have it active on the screen, that whenever you start Discord, or not Discord, but OBS, it will automatically put you into that room. So you have to, if you're just popping on OBS to test something, it will put you in the Discord room. So you're going to have to be mindful of that. Then the thing that I have that shows what I have playing now during like my intro bit, or if I have to step out for a second, that is a plugin I use Foobar for my music. It is a plugin called Now Playing Simple, I believe. And basically it's something that it will produce TXT files wherever you want to put them that I have as a text source. That it will just read in whatever is in that text file. And basically I have it so that if something's not playing, it will just be blank. And if something's playing, it will give the album and the song name. So it'll say something like song name from album. And there's that. It requires a little bit of scripting, but if you're at all familiar with scripting, it shouldn't be that terribly hard to do. Then the chat box, and the event list are from Streamlabs. I believe on the chat, I used a little bit of CSS editing to kind of get the way I want. Also, I believe I'd used a little bit of CSS editing on the alert box, but not that much. But yeah, so you can pretty much set those the way you want. Those are also browser plugins. Then the avatar system at the very bottom of the screen is basically that it's a program that you can get on Steam called Stream Avatars. And basically it's an avatar system for your streams. There's a lot of pre-built one, like it has Steam workshop support. So there's a lot of ones that are already built. But I went ahead and edited sprites based off of, there is a Kunio-kun game for the on Steam called I think it's River City All-Stars, I believe is the name of the game. But they had all their sprites like TGA files in the game's folder. So I was able to take those, edit them into something somewhat original. Not really, but I wouldn't say super original, but basically it's something that could fit nice on the stream, and you can make them, it would show up good. And also I was able to like take the head out so I could make customizable heads and all that. And basically all those customizations you do just in a image editing, Sprite works wonders for that. So there's that Stream Avatars. It's something that it's fun to kind of poke around with. And also, so the way that the Stream Avatars works is basically, so thinking of like, it's because it is a layered thing. So basically, on the very top of that bottom image is Stream Avatars. The nice thing about Stream Avatars is the fact that when you just pop it on for it to run, the avatars just appear on a very basic background that you can chroma key out really easily. And you can actually set what color it is, so you can chroma key whatever you want. So you can set it to a color that none of your avatars have or will have, and it'll clear it out perfectly. So that's on top. Then I have a series of texts that are basically they're like the labels that say, okay, here's the most recent sub, here's the most recent follow, here's the highest bit haver, as well as here's what my Twitch follow count and my YouTube follow count or count is. Those are all taken. Streamlabs has a program called Stream Labels that will, much like that Foobar plugin, will just put a bunch of TXT files on your hard drive wherever you want them, and you can just read them in as text. You can just read them in as text sources on your screen or in your OBS. I will say though, if you are using Streamlabs OBS, which is perfectly viable, that stuff is kind of built in, so you don't even need stream labels for. So if you want to use the Streamlabs kind of environment or the ecosystem to do that and use Streamlabs OBS as your main stream, that stuff you don't even have to bother with stream labels. It's just built into the platform, which is one nice thing that maybe I might switch over one day if my overlay wasn't already convoluted enough. Then on the, so there's the text is kind of just below the avatar, so the avatars could walk in front of it, but usually they're all grouped up enough that that's not as much of a worry, and they'll be right over it in like a second. So it's not going to completely obscure it unless you have a huge number of followers. So then I also have a image source, which is basically the rotating billboard. So basically that's an image board or just an image source that cycles through a folder of pictures that I have. They're of the same size. That's on the same layer as the text. And yeah, so that will just cycle, and I placed it so that it's the same shape as the billboard, which is the background, which is just done in Asprite. It doesn't have anything filled in for the billboard, and it's just complete. It's just an image that's on a bottom layer, then that's below the text, the billboard, and the avatars. So there's that. So the way that I kind of have it work for the side stream is, so I actually have Streamlab OBS open as well as OBS Studio. So in OBS Studio, if you right click on a scene, you can do what they call project it. So I do a full screen projection of the main stream onto one of my monitors, that because I have 3 monitors actually going at the same time. So I put it to a monitor that I tend not to use quite as often, or it's kind of the more side one that I just put stuff that I only have to glance at every once in a while. And then I have OBS Studio. The only thing that OBS Studio is grabbing is basically that full screen projection from OBS Studio. So that's the video component of that, because I think that's pretty much it in terms of my overlay. I also use Streamlabs' alert thing, which is just as easy to set up as any of their other stuff. So that's that. So I should probably get into my sound setup right now. So right now, I am using a program called Voicemeeter Potato, which is a more intense version of a software they have that's called Voicemeeter Banana. And basically what Voicemeeter Banana is a virtual mixer. So I can have my microphone, so to go back, let me just talk about my sound hardware at the moment. So right now, I actually have plugged into my computer a set of speakers, a USB, my set of speakers, which is connected to a USB sound card. I also have another USB sound card that I have a headset plugged into, which is, the headset is actually one that I just got recently that's really nice because I kind of like a very specific set of headphones. I believe it's a Sennheiser Game 1, I believe they're called. They're an open head or open backed set of headphones. So you have a better, so the thing with closed and open back, so basically these open back ones, you can it is really bad at sound isolation. So you'll be able to hear everything that's going around you, which is actually good for me because I don't have any set of sound going on in the room that I am actually recording this in. The only sound I get is from my headset. So the thing that's nice about the open back is I can hear my own voice. So I'm not having, if I'm using closed, I tend to yell, or I tend to speak a lot louder, which doesn't sound good. But the open back headphones let me kind of speak a little bit more naturally. So I'm not just screaming at the thing, unless, I actually am screaming for some reason. So that's a nice set of headphones. Also, it does have a built-in headset, but I don't use it because I have a dedicated microphone, which is actually something that I got really recently, and I am incredibly happy that I bought this because it's something that I think is not as kind of spoken about a whole lot. because when you talk about dedicated microphones, like dedicated USB microphones in particular, used for streaming, kind of the gold standard is the Blue Yeti, which I'm actually holding my Blue Yeti in my hand, which is pointless because it's an audio format. But I actually had a little bit of issue with there is a thing with the Blue Yeti. It is a very nice microphone. The thing with the Blue Yeti is, it is great. It is really, like, it shines if you have multiple people in the same room, or if you're trying to get like the acoustics of a room. Like, it's really good for like recording instruments, or like something where you're talking, like more people are talking into the one microphone. In my stream setup, that's not needed. So I'm kind of doing the overkill. Like, it is a fantastic microphone. Don't get me wrong. But for streaming, if I'm just going to have this big old microphone in my face the entire time, there's better solutions to that. And it's what I'm using. One that I'm using right now is actually a phenomenal solution that is also half the price of a Blue Yeti. The microphone that I'm using is a Samson Q2U. And it is, I think, the cheapest you can. Let me actually just do a cursory. Do Samson Q2U. You can get just this microphone for $60, which right now, just to kind of a point of comparison, a Blue Yeti is going to be $130 or 100. Well, actually, okay, they sell one for $90, but that's on sale though. So I don't know how long this is going to last, but even without the sale, the Samson Q2U is $60. If you get it on sale, you can get it for much cheaper than that. I think you can even get a podcasting kit that is, I think, maybe $10 more than that. It comes with like a stand and like a pop filter and a whole bunch of other stuff that you're going to want, and like a little mount. But like, yeah, it is phenomenal for what it is. Like, the thing with it is that it is what they call a dynamic microphone. So really it's meant to be for one source, which is just me, because I'm the only one that's talking to this microphone. And what I found is that it's really good at picking up the enunciation of my voice. So like, it sounds a lot more natural, which is actually really interesting for something that is technically, there's the whole thing. And even though this isn't it's incredibly not true. Actually, you know what? I'm now looking at, I see this podcasting pack thing. It is the same exact price. It is $60. And I don't know if this is actually on sale. This might actually just be the MSRP for it. But yeah, it is a phenomenal little thing. Which is also one nice thing about it. I'm not using this at the moment, but if you are someone who is really into sound and have a mixer that has XLR inputs, this is an XLR mic as well as a USB mic. So it's really useful for really if whatever your setup is. Like, I am incredibly happy with I would say my purchase, except I got it as a gift, so it really wasn't my purchase, but I'm incredibly happy that I have this thing now. Also, it's a lot smaller. The thing is, though, is that you really have to... My setup is a little weird because I bought a desk clamp for my mic that is a bit cheap and also a bit bulky, but it does the job pretty well. So yeah, it kind of sets so it's right where I need it to. And I think this mount, I think, was like $10. So you can actually get a really good quality setup for the same price you would just buy the Yeti for. Actually, no, I take that back because I just looked. It's showing me my mic and it's showing me that I was actually off. It is actually a $30 thing, so maybe it's not as cheap as I remember it. It just kind of feels a little cheap. But that's that. So enough of that. So basically, going back to Voicemeeter. With Voicemeeter, I have my headphone as an input, or my microphone as an input. I technically have the headset on the Sennheiser Game On, even though I don't use it. Also, I have using the external sound card that I have that's plugged into my speakers. It has a line in. So I actually have the line in from a TV or my other monitor that I use plugged into my capture card, which I'll go into my capture card. I forgot to talk about that. So I have that connected from my monitor to that, so my sound comes in from the same thing, and also my headset and speakers are also plugged in. So my main desktop audio is going to both my headset and my speakers, so I can just swap between them if needed and just mute my speakers if I'm talking on like Discord or something. Voice meter is a little bit tricky to set up, but and that's probably for a different thing. But yes, I think that's pretty much it for my hardware. Although I did mention my capture card. I have an Elgato, I believe it's an HD60 Pro. It is the PCIe version of it. So it's a built into my tower. So it's been treating me pretty good. I could at some point upgrade to one that does 4K, but I'm never going to be, I don't think that I'm going to be encoding at 4K anytime soon. So it should be fine for the time being, providing that my computer, since it's hand built, has been having issues. So if I have to ditch it, that's not going to be good, at least from the capture card. So I'll have to get another one at that point. But yeah, so the nice thing about Voicemeeter is that it will give you two outputs. So depending upon how you wire your setup, you can have it so that my mainstream, which my mainstream gets the sound from my Discord, my own microphone, and my main desktop audio, while the side stream is only getting my desktop audio. So the people who are in the Discord call can pop up the side stream, see exactly what I'm streaming, while also getting a little bit less of a delay, and also not hearing their own voice. So they can actually listen to the actual audio from the stream. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my stream setup. And then the last question, which is, what has been your favorite Academy thing to draw? I kind of liked them all kind of equally, to be honest. Like it was really fun to kind of work with that. And I really kind of have, especially since after doing my Pixeltober thing, I kind of find pixel art fun. Like it is a really fun thing to do. And the most fun thing I would actually say to do this actually wasn't an Academy thing, but to draw my 6 little avatars. That was really fun to do. And it's one thing that is probably why I might want to do that tabletop podcast thing, because it was really fun to kind of get my creative juices going, like creating these characters and kind of thinking up backstories and doing that. It's just really fun. I really have fun creating stuff. So I know that's not quite the answer you probably had in mind, but yeah, I would say my avatars that I had, those were really fun to create. But yeah, and kind of come up with like little mini backstories and who they are. I think was really fun. So with that, that's all the questions I had asked. Also, I had been going on for a little bit longer than I expected, and my throat's starting to get a little sore. So I am going to end this right here, and I am just going to close out by saying thank you all for listening for this. If you like this, let me know, because then maybe this might be a little bit more frequent of a thing. So yeah, hopefully when this is up, I will be currently enjoying myself at MagFest. But yeah, I'll be back shortly. I'm just going to be gone for a week. So have a good day, and hope you don't miss me too much while I'm out. So thank you, and have a good night, evening, wherever you're doing this. All right, so looks like this thing's recording. Okay, so hello. It is currently 9:18 a.m. on December 23rd, 2018. And I'm recording this little thing because for the first week of January, I am not going to be in town, so I will not be streaming. So in order to keep consistency, I did want to have something that you can enjoy during that weekend. So I figure this would be it, because I really don't know what kind of video I would do, because I don't want to just I like having my actual video content kind of live now, so I don't really know what kind of side content I would do. Also, I need to kill some time, so I figure that this could be maybe I can do this a little bit more often, but this is going to be kind of a more casual kind of Q&A and kind of update, especially with it being the end of the year, just to kind of wrap up what we've done in this year, especially since I believe the first week of January will also be my 3rd year anniversary of streaming. I can't exactly remember what the date is, but I believe it is sometime in early January of 2016 is when I first started streaming, just for a couple people and nothing really like formal like my stuff is now. So also I'm need some time to kill. I got some laundry and I need to wait for the shops to open since they're not open this early, so I can do some errands. So yeah, a while ago I also said that I'd be doing Q&A, so I have some Q&A questions, and also I did a survey a long time, or like a while ago. Let's see, this would have been about sometime late November. I did a survey to kind of go over what kind of improvements or kind of what how you guys felt about some ideas I had for Retro and Crapsody, so we'll go over that as well. Also, this is going to be incredibly raw. I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of editing. So yeah, this is not going to be up to normal standards, whatever my current standards are. So yeah, just to give you a heads up. So, first things first I want to go over is I just kind of want to go over, well, what my 2018 performance is, or I guess not going to be like super self-critical or anything, but just kind of going over kind of the stuff that I've been seeing about my 2018 in review in terms of my content. So, I have my current Twitch channel statistics up, and looking at around the start of January 5th, looks like the first stream of the year, I had about 3.9 average viewers. And I kind of wish that this gave me my max viewers, but average viewers being the metric that Twitch seems to love, I had about 3.9 average viewers, which is not a lot. Just barely above the threshold for affiliate, which I believe I got sometime in the middle of last year. But anyway, yeah, kind of somewhere in between floating in between even like the 3 to 6 range is where I was starting the year out. So that was in January. Looking now, my last 2 streams that I had 12 and 11 average viewers. So that's just for those 2 days. For the streams on December 7th and December 14th, I had 17 and 20 average viewers, respectively. So I am incredibly happy with the growth that my channel's been getting, which I thank you all for watching. That really makes me happy. Unfortunately, now my next step in terms of channel growth, I guess, would be to get partner, which ain't happening anytime soon. And I really don't mind that it's not happening anytime soon, because 75 average viewers is quite a lot, and also it's going to take a while to get that organically. I don't want that to. If that meant that I would get that in the next year, that means I would have some huge spike, getting a spike in that kind of viewership when I'm not prepared for it is probably not going to be that great. So, yeah, I don't mind the pace that my channel's been growing. I'm perfectly fine with that. Seems like I've gotten over the year 44 average new followers, and right now I believe my count is at, 144? Yes, I'm currently at 144 followers, which is decent. I'm not going to complain about that. I mean, it's better than nothing. I know that there are some channels that I am kind of people who or friends that I stream with that have higher numbers, but that Doesn't mean just because the account's high doesn't mean that the quality of the followers are any worse, or that I really need to get that many followers. But yeah, I'm happy with the amount of growth. I'd kind of like it to get a little bit higher, but hey, I'll take whatever I get. Also, it means I am incredibly close to one of my first Retro Rank Rhapsody milestones, which at 150, I'll be taking a look at the game Log Milana, which, yeah, maybe that can kind of wait a little bit, because there's a few games I want to do before that, but also that's going to be a big one, so yeah, if that can be, I don't mind if that one kind of sits for a little bit, but I'm ready for it, so there's that. Also, I've been fluctuating between 2 and 4 subscribers. Granted, since it seems like a lot of these are just Twitch Prime, or it seems like some of my subs were Twitch Prime, so they expire. So I don't know if they will be re-subbing, and those numbers kind of get a little weird. Although I have been noticing that some of my subs have been from just Twitch, or just straight Twitch subs, so not even Prime. So that always makes me feel a little bit happy. So I'm also fine with that. This channel has always, it will always be, unless something dire happens with my employment situation, which I highly see that not even happening, even if I were to lose my current job, which I don't see happening. Although I really shouldn't say that, because those things happen. Even then, I'd be pretty fine in terms of this, so I don't think I would ever turn this into a full-time job, because this has always been more for the entertainment. This is more of a personal passion project. I really do not want to tie my monetary situation with this, because the moment that I feel like my streaming feels like a job is the moment that I will probably stop doing it, because that will kill all enjoyment that I have from this, because this has always been meant to be a passion project of mine. Like, I do not want to, if you don't feel like putting money up for this, that's what I expect. I have no sense of, there should be no obligation for you to pay me for my work. Especially considering that a lot of my work is based on the work of others, and I always feel weird about taking money from that. Even though, value added and all that, that's still always weirded me out. So yeah, that's kind of like my performance. I would be happy if it were to go a little bit more accelerated, like get a few more followers than I have been, more subscribers. But I'd rather that be organic and slow than non-organic and fast. So yeah, that's kind of what my performance has been. I have noticed that my YouTube channel growth has been kind of incredibly stagnant. Like, it's been sitting at 128 for quite some time. I don't know if that's just because YouTube's in a weird spot right now, like with all the stuff that's going on with like algorithm and all that, and the fact that it's mostly just a place that I kind of mostly treat it as a depository, or like a repository for the videos if someone wants to see it. It's not something if I were to drop either the Twitch or the YouTube, I would drop the YouTube first in a heartbeat. But I do know that some of you guys do watch this stuff on YouTube, so I have no plans to stop that. Also, the view counts that I've been getting, granted, this could just be me being bitter because they're kind of small, but they're consistent with my other views, so I'm not too worried about that. But also with the fact that YouTube's like what the word I'm thinking of, their metrics are all kind of weird, and I never really rely on them. So you could probably just give me a random number and I'd probably be okay. That's perfectly fine. So yeah, that's kind of the YouTube front. Basically, my plan is still to just upload my videos there. I don't think I'd ever switch from Twitch to go streaming, because their services are always so weird. But yeah. So I am perfectly fine with how the YouTube channel is. Also, I don't know how many people actually subscribe anymore, but because I'm just so out of that loop. So yeah, that's kind of the YouTube front. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would kind of expect from. I'm trying to think what I'm saying, kind of rambling a bit, but yeah, I'm fine with my channel growth. So that's, I think, for that reflection, I think that will be fine. Also, just a recap of just really the kind of main thing that really happened this year is I wouldn't say I stopped ranking of shmups, but I kind of evolved ranking of shmups into, well, Retro Rank Rhapsody. That's kind of the big thing this year. And I think this is kind of where I foresee going in the future. I know since I only did Retro Rank or like ranking of shmups for like a year, like, do I have plans to transform Retro Rank Rhapsody into something else? No. I think this is actually kind of Retro Rank Rhapsody seems to be kind of where my channel was always kind of going. Because I always like having something on the side, like some sort of project that I'm working on with my stuff. So doing Retro Rank Rhapsody, I feel, especially since my channel, like, it has always started on me just kind of showing off old games. Like, I never really did anything that terribly modern. Like, I would play like one-off games every once in a while, but nothing standard. And I kind of like having something standard. So Retro Rank Rhapsody is perfect for me, and I don't think that I'm going to be stopping this anytime soon. Because yeah, like, after me changing retro or rank of shmups into this, I don't have any plans to do anything that major. That's not to say though that I don't have plans for expansion, but it's going to mostly stay the same. Especially since part of the reason that I even changed it to Retro Rank Rhapsody is that I felt like I was starting. I mean, granted, I definitely was not actually doing this, but I was kind of running out of shmups. Like, I had kind of taken a look at all the big ones that I had wanted to take a look at. There were a couple franchises that I hadn't really touched a whole lot. The Raiden franchise, especially, I know is one that I only took a look at the first one. There's a couple that I hadn't quite finished. There's like one or two Gradius games. R-Type Final I never did. And there's just a bunch of one-offs that, like, it would be a lot of filler at that point. Also, Lord knows there's enough stuff on Steam that would last me another year. But yeah, that's kind of why the main crux of me changing to Retro Rank Rhapsody is just I kind of felt like I don't know where the content would go. Because Lord knows, even after I've almost been doing this for 1 year, the first year anniversary will be in May, I still have plenty of stuff to look at. I've barely touched, like, just taking Nintendo, for example, I've barely touched Zelda. I've only done the first two. Mario, I've only done Super Mario Brothers. And there's just a lot of stuff to go through in just that one incredibly small section. The Sega stuff, I've only done Sonic 1 at this point. I have not even touched like stuff like Phantasy Star or I've barely touched RPGs in general. So I have enough content to probably last me another decade of streaming. If I even, God, I don't even know if I want to think about me streaming in another decade. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind it because don't get me wrong. I don't think that it's something that I'm like, I'm seeing me stopping, but yeah, it's just weird seeing that, thinking a decade ahead because I barely know what I'm doing 2 months from now. So yeah, that's kind of, especially that, yeah, I think that's a pretty good reflection on the last 3 years of my stuff. Yeah, that's basically it. I've really been enjoying doing Retro Rank Rhapsody. I kind of like where it's been going so far. I've definitely started to see some things that I kind of want to change, but I'll go into that in a little bit. So yeah, so actually, I think that's probably a good segue for me to actually transition to talk about kind of where I am thinking of taking Retro Rank Rhapsody. Also, this is just for me. I'm going to stop recording because I will need to do something real quick. Okay, so let's actually talk a little bit more about where specifically I plan on taking Retro Rank Rhapsody. Um, so right now, let me just bring. I actually probably should have this up. Let me just bring up the list right now, because I know that I've hit. We hit our first list to have 100 entries. Although 100 tiers, I should say, because I think we've with games being of the same tier, which, just a side note, I kind of feel like I need to actually be using that a little bit more. But right now we're at 103 tiers in the resistance list. So yeah, that's especially with ranking of shmups. It was, since there was one list that was going to fill up a lot quicker. But yeah, it's nice to have at least one that has the 100 in there. Because yeah, I kind of expected that the first four of the list, that being attack, resistance, dexterity, and mind, I knew those would fill up probably a bit quicker than the others. But actually, it seems like it's been a little bit balanced. Well, a little bit more balanced than I was expecting. Right now, just to kind of go over, attack has 73 tiers. I just said resistance has 103. Dexterity has 41. Mind has 22. Intelligence has 13. Charisma has 17. Luck only has 4, which I kind of feel like I need to maybe I should actually focus a little bit doing a few more of these, because I mean, 3 of them were from the first episode that I did to fill out the list, and then one was during Extra Life. I feel like I should probably fill these out a little bit more. And then also another one I should fill out, adaptation, currently is also at 4. I know that there is an upcoming episode in which I'll probably add a little bit more to this list, but yes. Although then again, with that, especially being like a ROM hack kind of thing, that's probably just by design that it's not going to take, or that it's going to take a while to fill, because, you know, you got to do the thing that it's based on, or at least I should do the thing that it's based on first before I actually start taking a look at the modified versions. And then for long form, adventure is at 12. Delve is at 9. Experience is at 10. And planning is at 6. So that's probably kind of where I expected it. If anything, I was not expecting experience to have as many games in it as it did, but that's kind of where it ended up. Yeah, and adventure being higher, it didn't help that I was able to do those really kind of early on adventure-style games, like Highlight and Courageous Perseus, that did not take that long to take a look at. So, yeah, there's that. I think, let's see, total number of games ranked is 323. I believe at Ranking with Shmumps, the pace was 100 games every 4 months. So in I believe, just about 8 months, we've done about 123 more than that. That's kind of where I expected, especially since Ranking with Shmumps I only did once a week. With now Retro Rank Rhapsody there being 2. It definitely shows with the the longer form list. If I was just strictly doing shorter games, like the shorter arcade style games, this would definitely be higher. But yeah, that's a plenty high enough pace. And if anything, I think that actually maybe should get a little lower. But we'll kind of see as we go about that. And actually, one thing I will bring up is the actual pacing for the episodes. So, I think now would be a good time, now, especially since I'm talking about pacing, to go over that kind of survey that I did a while ago. So, I'll go over part of it, because part of this has to do with the future, which I'll do that kind of after I talk about some of the changes I kind of want to make in a bit more short term. So, some of the questions I would ask, which is what kind of episode format, which I think kind of ties into what we were just talking about. There were 17 people that took this poll. 70% did not have a preference, and it looks like 17.6% preferred the one longer game, and 11.8% preferred the shorter game, which kind of, if you're kind of taking this kind of as a total, really, it doesn't really say much about, it doesn't seem like there's that much of a preference whether or not you prefer the shorter or the longer. Of the ones that did have a preference, more people preferred the longer, but really in the grand scheme of things, that's really not much. There's not a definite like, hey, this is what people prefer, which is good because I kind of like mixing up, like, okay, doing like a longer game and then a shorter game, I should say an episode with one long game and then an episode with shorter games. Although I will say the longer games are a lot easier to test because I only have one game to test, but still. Usually that means if it's a longer game, I need to figure out how it actually plays, unless it's something I've just had baked into my DNA. Something like Zelda 2 or Zelda 1, which I'm just super familiar with just from playing it for almost 30 years at this point. So there's that. Also, maybe this could be an update for February thing because I kind of prefer to do, why don't we just talk about kind of what future updates I'm planning on doing? Because I am someone who very much likes the updating at set intervals. With this, it seems like I do 3 months, so it's kind of like if you think of like a quote unquote season of a show, that there be kind of so basically the kind of plan, like I started in May, and I think I don't know when that was, but around the 3 month mark, I did it so that I forgot what exactly I changed. I started the Retro Rank Academy avatar system is when I started doing that. I think that was the 3 month change, and then the 6 month change is when I started to actually introduce the. I believe that was the characters that I started to introduce. Or, because let's see, let me actually do some math. That would have been August, so yeah, that would have been the avatar system. And then right in November was when I introduced the avatars and also the new YouTube thumbnails. And also just changed up my layout a little bit. So there, yeah. There is another upcoming 3 month, I believe, at the end of January. So for stuff for February is where I would change it. The main change that I have been eyeing is actually, I think this kind of would be a 1 year change. Or I might save it for that, just so I can kind of have this dead set before I actually implement it. Is I kind of plan on reworking the entire way in which I do the kind of the sub-ranking right now. If you think about going to the list itself, the sound, style, feel, history, age, and approach, all of those, I kind of feel like I want to change how those kind of work, because I feel that assigning letter grades to those kind of things, especially with how I don't feel that they're kind of doing what I intended them to do. Because while it does kind of give like, oh, I kind of like say for music or for sound, I like the sound or I don't like the sound. It's kind of doing that, but stuff like feel, I think we're kind of getting a little like almost whose line in terms of what exactly the letters mean. And I can put a description all I want, but we always keep on ending up on like, it does feel kind of great, but it doesn't feel as bad as say this. So I'm not super thrilled with how these are kind of being implemented in their current state. I like the kind of the feel of what they're trying to do. But I don't feel like this is the best way to do that. So what I'm actually thinking of doing this is something that I got to figure out how exactly I want to do it, is basically taking all of those kind of taking we're not going to do it in categories anymore. Kind of what I'm thinking of doing is having here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I love, here's what I hate. So if you think about, especially now that I figured out how to do emojis, I guess, in this Google Doc, what I kind of think is doing is like, if we have a game that's like, I like the music, we just put some sort of music emote in there in the I like category. Because a lot of it's like, if we don't really have that much to say about it, we'll just kind of ignore it. And I think that will speed up that process a little bit more. So we can kind of go, okay, what did we like? Well, the music was kind of good. I'll put the music there. And if it's something that's like, like we just did Mega Man 2. The music in this game is phenomenal. We'll just put that in the I love category. And that would probably be something like, I had it where we would only do S's for everyone's, like, every 25 games I can put another S. So I think that's kind of what we'll do, is we're basically, okay, for every 25 tiers, you can have one, I don't know, like one for each kind of big thing, like the sound, the style, the feel, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm planning on doing with that. I haven't really started building that. And also that would not affect, I like the tone system, although I do kind of want to add more tone. I really need to just sit down and think of more tones to add. And then the tag system, I still like that. Even though I kind of wish that there was a better way that I could, like, I'm sure you could do this, but my scripting knowledge in Google Docs is probably not that high, where I kind of like it, like, if I put P, like, so something that you could, if you were to say go onto this list and you would hover over P, you're like, yeah, that means photosensitive. Or something like looking at Sonic the Hedgehog, where it has the M, like, that just means motion sickness. So that's kind of that's kind of the big change. And I don't know if I want to kind of work to have that in for February, because I feel that's kind of a major change, even though it's really not that big a change of what I'm doing. It's big in terms of like how to actually implement it. Also, it's better that I do this now, so I don't have to go back and translate like 100 more entries onto to kind of fit it with the new style, where if I hit it while the iron's hot, I guess that would probably be a time to do it. So I'll try to probably have that in for February, because that's kind of the big thing that I want to change. And that would probably be the most drastic change I would make there. I just got to see how much work I can put into it in February. Because if I can't get it reasonably, like if I'm not solid on it by the time February rolls around, it's probably not going to be implemented until May. So that'll give me some time to really kind of set what things like I mentioned it in, I think one of the last 2 episodes I did. I'm not super thrilled with how I have age set up right now, because I think it's kind of a weird thing to metricize, if that's a word. So yeah, I really need to I really want to make it solid what I plan on doing with things like that before I actually implement it. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest change that I have currently planned. The other change that I am thinking of, this is something that I'm kind of just prototyping this at the moment. I don't have anything set. Is kind of reworking the entire way that my overlay is. Because right now my overlay, it's fine. Like it's probably one of the better overlays I've had. Also, it's just something that with my streams that I can't just sit on an overlay. I have to change something with it. It seems like every 3 months. And the one that I'm thinking of doing is I've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not I want to have like a more present overlay or something more minimalist. And I'm kind of in the balance has kind of shifted in my head that I'm kind of thinking of trying something to do a much more minimal overlay, because I don't never want it to happen like, and this is coming out of an article that I read about, there was something about like how to improve your Twitch performance, which those are always somewhat situational, and it's like, it's not like it's guaranteed to kind of help. But one thing that did kind of stick out is, well, how big is the actual thing you're trying to show off on the screen? In particular, the game that I'm trying to show off. Right now, and this is a little bit weird because I stream in 720p, but I record in 1080p. And the thing is that I could worry about quality, like stream quality, all I want, but really, the more that I put into the quality, like the fidelity of the pixels, I don't care about the stream. And it's not like I don't want it to be bad, but in the things I'm kind of going into, this is more for the recording, because Twitch compression is always going to be a thing, and you're never going to get a perfect pixel thing on Twitch, which really, considering if you're a viewer, you want to have it like, you want to buffer less, you want to you want the latency between me actually putting the thing out and you actually getting the signal to watch. That should be as minimal as possible. And there's going to be compression involved in that. So me worrying about picture quality and compression is kind of, it's a moot point. But speaking of how you watch, like you have less latency, one thing that I got to worry about, and this technically, I guess, if you're watching YouTube on a phone, is that people sometimes watch these on mobile devices. And right now, the gameplay for my streams is on a little tiny, not tiny. If you think of 1080p being 1920 by 1080, the window at most is 1600 by 900. So it's a fraction of the screen. So what I'm planning on kind of doing is having it so that basically the actual gameplay takes up the entire screen, so that it would be taken from like a 1080p image. The thing with that though is, so that this would be like, because my emulator of choice for practically about 90% of the stuff that I do is RetroArch. So I would have the window for RetroArch be 1080p. But obviously the games that I tend to play, they're not for resolutions. They're not for 1080p resolutions. That's going to take a tiny bit of this, like they're going to be shrunk on the screen. And this is actually where having a 1600 by 900 window, that's not exactly a good measure. Like I could say that, but that's not how much it actually takes on the screen. If you're thinking of playing an arcade game, and if it's going to stretch, say, vertically, that's taking an even smaller portion of that. Like that will be like, the gameplay will be like 30% of the screen will be the game. So having as big of a window as possible for the emulator to be able to scale properly, I think is probably my best bet. Because there is a thing about emulators called integer scaling. Because if you think about like a old school arcade game, that's like something like, and I'm going to make these numbers up, but like 226 by 200. Like it's an incredibly small resolution. So these emulators can scale it up. The thing is though, is that if you scale up, if you're trying to just scale it up so that it fits the window, that might not be, it might distort some of the pixels, because if you think about 226, just a point of reference, 226, or like just say 200 by 200. If I'm at like something like, if it scales to some really specific like number, then the pixels on the thing are going to get a little bit warped. So if you have integer scales, so basically it's like, okay, if I have up to say, let's just say that the height is 1010 or 100. So for that, if I'm trying to scale up to like from 200, I would have up to 5 times, so it would get up to 1,000, so that it would put a perfectly scaled picture. And this is a horrible way of describing it, but of the moment, basically the gist is, I kind of want to have a nicer quality image for my recordings, which I know I just said that I'm thinking about if I were to dump YouTube, but having a nicer video recorded so that if you're watching the VOD, I think that would be kind of nicer. And that's kind of the only reason why I think about like doing something larger like that, because yeah, just for those specific instances where it would be nice, where I have to really worry about things being incredibly tiny on screen. Because like I'd watch other viewers, like I know, like just to give an example, I know Real Soviet Bear, he has a really nice overlay, and I don't mind that. That's really nice, and it works even on mobile, but then again, he tends to play games that are actually obtaining, like they're 16 by 9, they're modern, so they fit, and it works great for that. If I'm doing retro stuff, which a lot of it, there's a lot of blank space on screen. If I do something in my current format, I kind of want to get away from that. And there's always going to be an issue, like if I will stream at 16 by 9 because that's just what screens are now, or at least somewhat close. I mean, there's 16 by 10 and all sorts of other things, but it's not 4 by 3. Like I would never stream at 4 by 3, which tends to be the aspect ratio of stuff that I tend to look at. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of nonsense just to say. I'm thinking of changing my overlay. So basically you wouldn't have the stuff like on the side, like especially since I do tend to do 4 by 3, I can have it so that the chat is just on the side of the screen, because that one usually obscure a lot of stuff, and just my stuff is on the side normally, so it can kind of pop in and pop out, and I wouldn't worry about stuff. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of rambling to say. I'm just thinking about changing the overlay. I'm kind of doing some prototyping to make sure, because I know on my current layout, I have the things where it shows like who's the most recent sub, who's the most recent follower, who's the most recent, or who's the highest bit payer on my channel. And I kind of want to have that information still on screen, because I think it's kind of nice to have your name on stream if you kind of help out. So I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to actually have all that stuff on there. And I think I have kind of a good idea that it actually should be a lot smaller it should be the same size it is now. It actually might be a little bit more prevalent. It's just with the way that it is now, it is kind of neat how it kind of is immersed with the avatar system. So it's kind of works into the background, but I really don't think that is super necessary, especially since it is something that is on screen that can distract from the thing I'm actually trying to show off. So yeah, there's that. Also, I don't plan on doing anything like I really like my avatar system. I haven't really added much to it because I feel there really hasn't been a demand to change anything with it, because it seems like people have their avatars the way they like. But yeah, if anything for the avatar system that I would change is I've kind of had a desire to just change stuff on my channel to be more original, because like that avatar system is entirely, it's all those sprites are based off of Kunio-kun sprites. And if anything, I kind of want to change it to something a little bit more original, but I don't have any set ideas, so I don't know what I'd change with that. But that is something to think about for the far future, which I think that's kind of it for things that I plan on changing, that I have like kind of set ideas for them. There is actually one other thing, and this is going back to the survey. I kind of had some more ideas for what future. So rather than just having my episodes be, oh, let's just have me play a game and then whoever my co-coms is and me kind of talk about the game at the end. I kind of want something a little bit more different, just so it's not quite as stale. And I kind of had some ideas to talk about what kind of some ideas were. I had some of these in the survey. So kind of the first idea that I had was what I call the focus test. Have it so that maybe I'm not even involved in this, but having 2 to 4 other people, we would have them play the game that I try to test in some way for like 30 minutes. And then we stop and then we say, okay, let's rank. And it's something so that the list is kind of a little bit more like, I'll get into this later on, but I always feel that the list, I try and divorce my own ideas or like my own bias, that it's always going to have some element of it, but I try and kind of push it away as much as possible. So having it so that other people are playing the game can get a better idea, so it gets a little bit more of a quote unquote accurate ranking. Something that's not just my own personal views in there. Although I try and do that with the COCOMs, like their guidance. So it looks like from the polling, this seems to be the one that got the most, one of the ideas that was the most liked of the 17 people that took the poll, 12 people liked the idea. 4 people did not have a preference for it, and only 1 person didn't like it. And really, it seemed like someone took the poll and just did all the negative options. So I'm going to kind of discard that one. So basically, it seems like everyone kind of were either ambivalent or they liked the idea. So that's probably going to be one of the ones that I actually do. The other 2 kind of go hand in hand, which is something that I used to have on my streams all the time, which was races. So here's a game. 4 people try and complete it in the fastest amount of time. There was a side idea for that, which was basically, okay, for like, say something like an arcade game where score is a thing, just try and get the highest score in a certain amount of time. So for score, it seemed like that 10 people liked it, 5 people had no preference, and 2 people did not like it. And then for race, 9 people liked it, 7 people had no preference, and 1 person didn't like it. So it seems like it's a bit more not as straightforward as that. Like, I'm sure it'd be nice to have a couple of them, but I don't think that'd be something that I'd focus on. Also, because those things can kind of be hellish to actually manage, because I would probably because usually those have like 4 to 6 people in order to be kind of good. Trying to schedule those can be a little bit of a hassle. So I don't know how much of those I do, but it'd be kind of nice to have every once in a while. Then another option that's kind of related to that is tournaments. Basically so for a month, I'd be holding a tournament on kind of a theme of ideas. Like, think of like sports games. We could have kind of like a faux Olympics kind of thing. This was the most mixed option because it was literally 6 people didn't like it, 6 people didn't like it, and then 5 people didn't have a preference. So it was completely almost even in terms of So considering that would take an entire month to do, I'm probably not going to do that idea. And then the last idea, which seems, mathematically was the one that most people liked. And it's actually one that is pretty easy to manage too, which is nice. Which is what I call Lolo guides. So basically, it's kind of the focus test, or it's like how I normally rank games. Instead of me playing, it's someone else playing. I tell them about the game while they're trying to play it. So it's something that I could do if it's like, say, a really obscure game that I don't know a whole lot, or that I know a lot about. But if you're a newbie, you probably wouldn't get quite the handle on it. Like, it'd be a different experience, especially since if you're first time seeing this on the stream and you want to try it, that would be a more accurate kind of showing of the game. 13 people liked it, 3 people didn't like, or had no preference, and 1 person didn't like that, which again, that could be just the negative outlier. So it seemed like that pretty much had universal, hey, I like that idea. So I kind of would want to do, that's probably going to be one of the first ones that I end up doing. So there's that. That would be something that I actually could put in sooner. I kind of have January and February already scheduled, so that would be something I might try in March. Maybe also might try a focus test as well. But yeah, that's kind of what I see coming up soon in terms of things coming up. Also, since there is these two, which technically have to do with so these two next, I should just go into the next questions that I have for this, which are, essentially I probably could have gone on to this earlier, but basically kind of the format that I do my VODs in, because right now I just do one long edited episode, upload this whole 3-hour thing into YouTube, and just give timestamps on when the certain games are. So I did a poll about what preference do people prefer it in? Because right now I do the long video, but would it be better if I were to break it up by game? So like I take the episode, edit it into 6 chunks, and just upload that into YouTube. Or each episode as its own video. It seemed like this was a mixed question because as of right now, 9 people, which is 52.9%, say one long video, or they would prefer a long video, with 8 people, 47.1%, saying they would prefer it broken up. So it seems like it's kind of mixed on which would prefer. So really, with the amount of viewership that I'm getting from the YouTube channel to begin with, I think I'm just going to keep it doing one long video, but the timestamps will always be there. And then also, speaking of YouTube, where would you prefer the VODs to be uploaded? Because I know Twitch has some sort of thing where you can upload a video and you can watch it on demand. Do people prefer it that I would do it on YouTube or Twitch? This one's less mixed. 15 or 88.3% people said that they would prefer it on YouTube, with only 2 people saying or 11.8 preferring it on Twitch. So I'll keep YouTube as it is right now, because yeah. Okay, also I need to take a drink. Okay. So, future ideas. So, one thing that I do want to kind of do is I introduced the 6 avatars for the various lists. I kind of want to, and this wouldn't be something that would go into the thing, but I do kind of want and this is kind of one of my goals to have this done by May. I kind of want a little bit more, I guess, art, and also a little bit more solid kind of stuff for the avatars, maybe a little bit more kind of faux backstory and kind of something to kind of give them a little bit more character to them, and then have them have, I don't know what it would be. Maybe I just have them in like the art for like it, because I never want to integrate some sort of RP thing into like some sort of story into like my streams. Like I don't want it to be some sort of MS3K where there's a backstory to all this. That's not what I want. But I do kind of like having some sort of, here's kind of this representation of this show. And maybe if I were to do something with some sort of sub thing, like I don't know. Like there was a question that I heard a long time ago, which was that someone asked, is like, oh, hey, you've ranked so many games in like taking a look at so many things in the past. Would you ever try and take that and kind of try and make your own game? Which that's not quite how that works, but or it's not quite that easy, I guess, because I know game dev is hard, and it's not so much, I had this idea, it'll be easy for me to do it. But if I were to ever act on that, I have a set of characters and backstory that I can take from. So that's kind of where I'd want to go. Although there is one other thing that I'd be thinking of doing for that, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Because kind of my big pie in the sky idea for this kind of series, and this is something that would be far in the future when I even have just a set. This would be when I have everything ironed out with just the stream itself. One of the questions that I had was, and this is planning for the future, would you be interested in a podcast version of the show? So I am someone who listens to a lot of podcasts. Um, it's a nice format, especially for people who have office jobs like me. So that's probably why I'm a little bit more interested in it, where it's just something you can have. It's really easy to have on in the background. So it might not, I might still, this would be something I'd probably still upload to YouTube, but it's like this thing you're watching right now, where it would just be audio. So it's something you could be listening to while doing other stuff. And it's a more easy way to kind of enjoy the content. But there are some things that, like, I can't do my current streams in audio format. Part of it is the video we've actually seen the game. So I'd have to do something else with that. And I kind of had some ideas for what those other ideas would be. And this is something that if I were to ever expand the list into new things, this is kind of something that I think would be interesting to look at, because Lord knows there are plenty of podcasts out here. So I don't want to just do something that someone else is doing, or at least do something that doesn't have my own take on it. And that would be taking a look at how, like, because Lord knows there are plenty of things like movies, TV shows, and books that are based on video games. Like if you think of like the Mortal Kombat movie, like the various Sonic shows, like the Mega Man cartoon, all those things that are video game related, but are in different formats. And I think one thing that would be interesting, especially to rank, which is to see how does this medium, or taking this video game and putting it into this franchise, or putting it into this other medium, compare. Like, how are they? Which one put like the most amount of effort into it? And just kind of not only doing that, but kind of going into all these that exist. And just kind of talking about it. And this could be in a format of, do I do it like a riff tracks kind of thing, where I get a group of people to just watch the thing and we just record our commentary, or do we just watch it beforehand and just give our thoughts? It's something that I'd still be thinking about, but I think it'd be something that would be interesting. Also, to do the vice versa. So let's say take a movie and play the game that it's based on and see how they compare to the movie. Like, are there like games that are better than the thing that they're actually based on? And I think kind of putting that together, I think would be an interesting idea for a bit of content that's somewhat related to this channel. That's something that I could probably do. That one seemed to be the idea that most people seem to like. Also, I should say, I did have a question. Would you be interested in a podcast version of this show? 29.4% of people, which is 5, said no. The same amount of people said that they were not sure. But 41.2%, or 7 people, said that they would be interested in it. So it's not the most popular idea, but maybe if I were to actually like do a test run of it, maybe people could be interested in that and kind of see what it's going on. Because I think it'd be something that'd be interesting, and it's something that it's just another thing that I know people listen to podcasts, though granted, you also have the thing where there's umpteen million of them, so do I really want to throw my hat in the ring? I don't know. But yes, going back to the movie thing, 12 of the people that said if they would be interested in, basically I had a thing of like, would you be interested in this? 12 people said they would be interested in that idea, which is 80%. So I think of the podcast, that's the one that I think would be most interesting in, or most interesting. And it's not that terribly hard to do. It would be the one that's also probably the easiest to do. So yeah, if I were to do a podcast, that'd probably be the format that I would do. So yeah, another idea that I had, and this is actually something that I floated when I first kind of came up with the idea of how to do Retro Rank Rhapsody, would be doing the thing that everyone seems to be doing, which is to do tabletop and / board games. So this would also be another thing that I might do, that characterization thing. Like if I could think of some story that's like, oh, I don't know what it would be, but have it so that kind of doing the thing that everyone does, which is a play-by podcast of various tabletop games and board games, Because I think it would be interesting to kind of like a lot of people do like when they're doing D&D stuff, they're always doing like the more modern versions. Like where I think it would be kind of more fitting for my kind of stuff is where it's like, okay, let's get D&D first edition and just kind of go through like the various editions of all these board games and just have it do somehow where I could take a look at a lot more varied selection. But I don't know how I would even do that. So that's one that I think would be in the far future. But it is something that I kind of have been thinking about a bit. That's the second most popular one because 11 of 17 people said that they would be interested in that, which is 73.9. That one I think would probably be the most hard one to do because not only do I have to think of some weird version of this and think of like, okay, how is this even going to work? Because, I'm not super familiar with like tabletop, so I would have to DM, which I've not really done much, which it would only be good if I was actually good at it. So that one would require a bit of work. Also, scheduling those kind of things are a nightmare, so we'll see. I think that would be one of the more interesting ones, but it's also one of the more difficult. And then the last one idea that I had would be because video game soundtracks seem to be a thing that show up a lot on discussion of my the ranking. Like I know when we first did ranking of shmups, we had the ranking of the OSTs. So video game, and I love listening to video game soundtracks, so it's something that's kind of close to me. The thing is with that is that there is a podcast called Pixelated Audio, which is basically that same idea. So I'd basically just be stepping on their toes and also doing it in a way that they do a phenomenal job over there. So I don't think that it's an idea that I had, but they're probably going to do it far better than I'm ever going to do. So this is probably the one that I'd probably be the least interested in. Although 8 people or 53.3% of people said they would be interested in it. So, yeah. So that's kind of going over what I have planned in the future so far for Retro and Crapsody. As of right now, in terms of episode scheduling, I have all the way up through, there's one episode in February that I'm not 100% certain on what it's going to be, but I do mostly have I have January completely filled and February almost completely filled. And so that is something to look forward to. Also, so the one thing I did actually change because I have themes for each month. And I think this was part of the October or going into November changes that rather than do one theme a month, that I would have dueling themes, or not dueling, but like 2 themes a month. So half the episodes would be on this theme, half of them would be on another theme. So I think because naturally there are certain themes to take a look at for months. Like obviously October, we're going to do spooky stuff. December, this month, we're doing something based on holidays. I do kind of have some of those set ones already. For example, April, since April is I believe the first month of spring. It's either that or late March. So there is a genre of games that we've not really scratched as much as we probably should, and that's sports games. So in April, we're going to be taking a look at sports games. So I have 4 ups. I have technically 3 sports ones because April is also where episode 100 is, which just so happens to fall on 420, but it is also 42019, which is the 30th anniversary of the release of Adventures of Lolo. So you're damn right, I'm going to do something special for that. So that's April. Also, one thing that I was planning on doing this year that I didn't because I didn't have anything, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. Also, that was right when I was in the middle of trying to rank specific stuff to just get stuff on a list, was to actually, celebrate Pride Month. I am not someone who identifies as any of the categories that Pride represents, But that does not mean that I can't sell or that we shouldn't use that opportunity to take a look at some games that would be fitting for the month. So that is coming up in June. The main thing that I know for that is we will be taking a look at the adventure game Read Only Memories, which definitely has a retro vibe to it and very much is fitting for the month. August I don't have, so this, my kind of goal would be basically I would do this every other month. So months like March, May, July, September, and November, I would have the polls on my Discord for both themes. Even though I like, say for example, the June Pride Month one, you guys would still have choice on what the other half of the episodes would be. So yeah, that's pretty much it and what I have scheduled for the future. So yeah, I think that's enough for that. I can't think of anything else. So on to the thing that I actually asked questions for, and I am also going to break real quick so I can get a drink.